Hi, I'm Martin Rothery. If you've somehow found your way to this video or audio, chances are you're not a hobbyist. You're probably a therapist, a counsellor, a coach, a hypnotherapist, a healer, a magical practitioner, or someone who's been on the receiving end of a lot of change work and has realised there's more going on here than the manuals admit. Now, what I want to do in the next 20 minutes or so is very simple. Give you a clear picture of what the Nine Realms actually are. Explain why I built this architecture in the first place. Show you how it changes the way you think about tools, techniques and results. And help you decide whether this is a world you want to step into or not. This is not a sales webinar. Think of me as handing you a map and saying, here's how I see the territory. If this place feels like the place you've secretly been living in, then we can talk about the next steps. Now let's start with the honest bit. Most serious practitioners and me are not short on techniques. They've got CBT and trauma models, EMDR, IFS, somatic bits, parts work, hypnosis, NLP, tapping, breath work, tarot, ritual, energy work, manifestation practices. The problem isn't shortage, the problem's structure. Without architecture underneath all of that, you end up in one of a few patterns. You start throwing techniques at symptoms, hoping something sticks. You get overly attached to your one true method. And when it fails, you secretly blame the client or yourself. You start collecting more and more tools, but you have no coherent way to decide what belongs here with this person in this moment. If you're honest, you've probably had sessions where your internal monologue is, let's try this and see what happens. Maybe this protocol fits. I hope they respond to this method. That's not a moral failure. It just means your map of change isn't as solid as your toolkit. And the Nine Realms exist because of that gap. They are quite literally an architecture for human change, a way of understanding what layer of reality you're working with, what actually belongs at that layer, and how to move intelligently between layers without getting lost or doing harm. Now, before I walk you through the realms themselves, it's probably fair that I tell you how I got here. I didn't wake up one day and decide, I know, I'll make a 9-layered metaphysical architecture and call it the Nine Realms. Like most people in this field, I started as client zero. I've been through my own trauma, my own pain, my own collapses and strange experiences. I didn't come to this as an academic exercise. I came to it because the usual approaches were not enough. And every time I found an answer, it generated 10 new questions. Why does this work with one person and not another? Why does this technique help for 3 months and then everything snaps back? Why do some people experience, frankly, paranormal things in sessions, and what we're supposed to do with that? Over about 40 years, I went down a lot of rabbit holes. Traditional therapy models, hypnosis, NLP, and the whole change work world. Pain relief and psychosomatic work. Mythology, magic and mystical traditions. Voodoo, hoodoo, hermeticism, chaos magic, shamanism, dreamtime, and that whole wild forest that I created called Sanamentology, which is my flagship process in the healing realm. It all grew out of that. But even that wasn't enough. I kept hitting this problem. I have powerful methods, but where is the architecture that tells me what belongs where? And it became obvious that what I needed wasn't another technique. I needed a way to see all the different layers of reality a human being lives in, and to work with them in a coherent and ethical way. And that's what the Nine Realms are. So let's talk about tools versus architecture for a moment, and then I'll give you a tour. Think of a house. Techniques are tools and furnishings, a hammer, a drill, a beautiful sofa, a fancy coffee machine. Architecture is the actual structure, the foundations, the walls, the rooms, the staircases, where the plumbing and wiring actually go. A lot of change work today is like showing up at a plot of land with a van full of furniture and power tools, but no blueprint. So you plug things in where you can, you build little structures here and there, and you paint over cracks. And sometimes it looks okay for a while. But under stress, trauma, loss, illness, deep identity crisis, magical or non-ordinary experiences, you find out very quickly that there is no real structure underneath. You see this in real life. One technique appears to erase a phobia in 20 minutes. Brilliant. The same technique does almost nothing on a client with complex trauma. A manifestation process gives someone a shockingly accurate result in one area and does nothing in another. A person feels transformed after a weekend retreat, and 6 months later, everything snaps back. That's not because the techniques are fake, it's because they're used without architecture. The 9 realms are my attempt at that architecture. They're the rooms of the building. And different techniques belong in different rooms. Different client problems live in different rooms. And you, as the practitioner, are not outside of the building. You're part of it. So let me walk you through each realm in simple language. I'll give you the overview first, and then we'll loop back with a couple of examples. The realms are practitioner, consciousness, identity, emotional, healing, liberation, heroic, transformational, and potentiality. So let's start with realm 1, the practitioner realm. The first realm is you. Now, most trainings treat the practitioner as a neutral technician. Just follow the script, run the protocol, do the method. But in reality, 2 practitioners can use exactly the same process. One will get a miracle, one gets meh. The difference is almost never they memorize the script better. It's your nervous system, your trauma history, your identity and archetype in the work, your relationship to power, money, authority, visibility, your ability to hold complexity without rescuing or collapsing. So the practitioner realm is about ethics and boundaries, about shadow and savior complexes, how you show up in the room, where you are actually the bottleneck. Before we talk about changing other people, the architecture starts by changing you. At realm 2, we've got the consciousness realm. And this is not in the vague raise your vibration way, but as a multi-layered model of how consciousness is structured and how those layers interact to form reality. So in this realm, we look at different layers of consciousness, from surface thinking and narrative through symbolic and emotional layers down into deeper patterning and fields. What actually tends to happen at each layer, what shows up and what can be worked with and what can't. How these layers intersect to create a person's experienced reality, their sense of self, the world, possibility and limitation. How certain phenomena like synchronicities, downloads, imaginal experiences, or apparently impossible shifts can be understood as interactions between layers rather than random weirdness. So instead of treating consciousness as one flat thing called the mind, the consciousness realm gives you a stacked, structured map. So when something happens in a session, a sudden image, a strange shift, a deep stillness, you can ask, what layer are we in right now? What belongs here? What doesn't? Where do we go next? And how do we do that safely? Without a map like this, people tend to go to extremes. They either oversimplify everything to thoughts and beliefs or disappearing into vague spiritual language with no structure. The consciousness realm sits in the middle and says, here is how consciousness is layered, here is what each layer does, and here is how it all fits into the architecture of change. At realm 3, we've got the identity realm, who this is all happening to. Now, most methods reduce identity to beliefs about myself. But in practice, identity is the roles we play, the archetypes we inhabit, the stories we live inside, the deep patterns that keep repeating. There are the classic archetypes many of you will know: the hero, the victim, the sage, the rebel, the caregiver. And in my work, I also talk about a 13th pattern, the God seed. The part of you that doesn't fit into any single archetype. The part that remembers who you are more than any role, story, or pattern. The part that can reorganize identity from a deeper place. Now, if you don't work properly in the identity realm, you can change beliefs and still have the same life pattern. You can do great emotional work and still have the same archetypal script. You can talk empowerment while living out as a martyr or a rescuer unconsciously. So the identity realm is about seeing and reshaping those patterns and reawakening the God seed. At realm 4, we've got the emotional realm. Emotions as signals, not problems. A lot of change work treats emotions as noise to be turned down or a block to release, a low vibration to get rid of. In the emotional realm, emotions are outputs of a complex system, the body, the history, the environment, the identity. Messages about what is happening and what matters. Navigational instruments. If you shut down emotions without hearing them, you're cutting off vital information. You're making people easier to control, not more free. And you often guarantee that the pattern comes back in another form. So here we work with how emotions actually form, what they're pointing out, how to help people hear them and then transform them rather than suppressing them. These first 4 realms together, the practitioner, the consciousness, the identity and the emotional, are what I call foundations. And without them, everything else wobbles. The 5th realm is healing, and this is where sentimentology lives. Here we deal directly with pain, physical and emotional, trauma and complex histories, anxiety, phobias, intrusive patterns, stuckness that feels deeper than mindset. This realm acknowledges clinical reality, diagnoses, nervous system, medical considerations, psychological reality, memory, narrative, attachment, conditioning, mythic and magical reality, the way symbols, dreams, entities, ancestors, and other non-ordinary phenomena show up in real people's lives. Sentimentology was built to work in that intersection. It respects the science, it respects the story, it respects the strange. So in the healing realm, we're not doing motivational speeches. We're working on the roots. The 6th realm is liberation. Here we step back from the individual and look at the caves that they live in. You can do brilliant personal work with somebody and then send them straight back into a toxic family system, an abusive workplace, or a culture that constantly re-traumatizes them. Media streams that are designed to keep them afraid and small. So liberation is about seeing the water you're swimming in, the systems, the narratives, the power structures. Understanding modern Plato's caves with the screens, the algorithms, the propaganda. And facilitating genuine freedom of perception. Without the liberation realm, the risk is you heal people just enough that they can function in systems that are actively harming them. You call that success. Here we get honest about that. The 7th realm is the heroic realm. And this is not about becoming a superhero. It's about everyday heroism. Design challenges, structured confrontation with the things that scare us. This realm is the Hercules quest, based on the 12 labours, and it's a framework for taking clients and yourself through deliberate, meaningful challenges. It's not about trauma for trauma's sake, but initiations that grow capacity. Without the heroic realm, people understand a lot, but they don't do things differently. They stay safe, but small. And this work says, okay, you've healed, you've seen the cave. Now, what are you going to do with your life? The 8th realm is transformational, and here we work with identity change and reality change in a more deliberate, measurable way. The program inside this is called Reality Hacker, and it's a rebel's path to measurable and repeatable manifestation. This is where we design and install new identities. We create structures in reality that force those identities to express. And we track change over time. So it's not just, I feel different after the retreat, but my life is actually no different 6 months later. Transformational work is beyond symptom fixing, beyond just feeling better. It's about who you become and how that shapes what reality does around you. The ninth realm is potentiality, magic and miracles. And this is where I finally stopped pretending that magic was just a metaphor. In the potentiality realm, we look at voodoo, trance and embodiment, hoodoo, charm crafting and object encoding, pagan and earth traditions, elemental and cyclinical magic, Celtic and Norse systems, Aboriginal dreamtime, Mayan time magic, Hermetic mentalism, chaos magic, modern psi research, telepathy, clairvoyance, anomalous cognition. And these aren't done as fun stories, but as patterns of how reality behaves when you interact with it in certain ways. So we look at things like telepathy, non-local influence, atmokinesis, biokinesis, all the other kinesis stuff people play with, star magic, planetary forces, lunar and solar cycles, the Akashic field, the idea of a living informational space. And we ask, how much of this is already quietly present in therapy, coaching and healing? How do we work with it on purpose, ethically and sanely? How do we avoid both gullibility and denial? The potentiality realm is for people who have seen too much to keep pretending reality is purely mechanical, but who also don't want to abandon discernment. So that's the quick tour. How does any of this change what you actually do? Let me give you a simple composite example. Imagine a client comes to you with chronic anxiety, ongoing pain, a pattern of painful relationships, and a handful of strange experiences they're slightly afraid to tell you about. In a tool-only world, you might pick your favorite anxiety technique, do some reframing, maybe some somatic work, give them some coping strategies. You might help a bit. In Nine Realms architecture, you'd start asking different questions. As a practitioner, you ask, who am I when I work with them? Am I trying to rescue, prove myself, fix them to feel okay about myself? At the consciousness level, you'll think, what states are they going into? Are they in disassociation, trance, hypervigilance, dreamlike states? How does their experience of reality actually behave? At the identity level, you'll be thinking, what archetypes are running this show? Victim, hero, martyr, tyrant, orphan. Where is their God seed, the part that doesn't fit the old story? At the emotional level, what are their emotions actually signaling? Fear, anger, shame, what are they pointing at? At the healing, what needs deep work, trauma, pain, unfinished processes? What lives below those coping strategies? At liberation, what systems and narratives are they trapped in? Family, culture, media, beliefs about what's possible? In the heroic, what design challenges would genuinely grow their capacity? Not burn them out, but initiate them. Transformational, who are they becoming? How do we build that identity into reality so it's not just talk? And at the potentiality, what's happening at the level of synchronicity, magic and weirdness? How do their strange experiences fit into the pattern? Now, you don't have to answer all of these in one session, obviously. But now you have rooms in the building. You're no longer guessing, you're locating. Right now, I'm in the emotional realm with them. Now we're touching identity. This symptom is really about the healing realm. This non-ordinary stuff is firmly in potentiality. That's the shift from tool collector to architect of change. So who is the Nine Realms actually for? It's for you if you're a therapist, counsellor, coach, hypnotherapist, healer or magical practitioner. If you feel like you've been living between worlds, the clinical, the spiritual, the magical, with no single home. You've seen your methods work sometimes like miracles and sometimes like nothing at all. If you suspect the issue isn't more tools, it's better architecture. And if you're willing to look at your own structure as seriously as You look at your clients. It's not for you if you want a weekend trick you can slap on everything, if you want guaranteed results without taking responsibility, if you're not willing to hold complexity, uncertainty, and mystery, and if you're happy pretending that magic doesn't exist or pretending that everything is magic and nothing needs critical thought. This work asks more of you. It does not let you hide behind scripts. It asks you to become somebody who can walk all 9 realms with a client ethically. Now, if you've listened this far and your body is going, this is the territory I've been living in for years, I just didn't have language for it, then there are a few simple next steps you can take. If you're in the US, there's now a dedicated home for this work. That's at us.martinrothery.com. There you'll find an overview of the 9 realms, a free guide called The American Underground Practitioner's Field Guide, 7 ways shallow change work fails, and the architecture that fixes it. You can download that at us.martinrothery.com/free-PDF. If you're elsewhere in the world, the main site is martinrothery.com. You'll find the realms, Boundless, the full 9 realms training, Boundless Foundations, the first 4 realms for people who want to start with the architecture underneath everything. Now, whether you ever trained with me or not, I want you to have this. The next time you're in a session and you notice yourself thinking, let's just try this and see what happens, pause. Ask instead, which realm am I actually in right now with this person? And what actually belongs in this realm? Even that one question starts to move you from guessing to architecture. And if at some point you want to build that architecture properly, you know where to find me. Thank you for taking the work and the people you serve seriously enough to even listen to this. I'm Martin Rothery. This has been your first introduction to the 9 realms. I'll see you in whichever realm calls you next.